Hello! In this video, I want to talk about how I painted the picture Black Woman and share some technical details, as well as show which colors I use and how I mix them. Actually, the very first color, the main one that I mix, as you can see, is all in one pile. I take yellow, red, and white as the base, and then I add some burgundy, a bit of brown, and more white, so that it doesn't get too dark, and I create a general shape for the face. Now, as you can see, I'm also painting the neck right away. This color shouldn't be too dark or too light, and it should match the skin tone that will be added later, since it's the base. So not the darkest or the lightest color, but again, it's better to choose a lighter color rather than a darker one, because it's easier to lighten it up later. So I've sketched out a turban or a scarf on the head, and as you can see, I used the face as a base, meaning I'm copying some features based on the shapes. The turban and everything else I'll paint in myself as I see fit. Lately, I've been really trying to train my creativity as much as possible and basically come up with my own ideas. But after several years of copying, it's actually pretty hard to switch from relying on external sources to relying on your own inner inspiration. So look, I've picked up a second color, a darker brown, just brown mixed with burgundy and orange, and I've marked the shadows. Take a look. The face is divided into three parts, the eye sockets, then the base of the nose, and the lips. I've outlined here, also marked the shadowed sides, and defined, you could say, the silhouette, even more. This helps us determine the volumes and proportions of the face and body more accurately. So, and look, right now I'm trying to mix and lay down the base with rather muddy colors. So what we get here is a very rough underpainting. So I used a pretty big brush. I'm using a solvent, and now I'm taking a smaller brush, and look, I'm picking up colors. Still a bit muddy for now, but lighter overall. I'm picking up shades. What's the task? Initially, we lay down the base of one color. Then I started with the darkest ones, and now, when we have both dark and light areas, I start adding midtones, smoothing out the shapes a bit. So you could say that with this brush, I'm just blending some of the rough areas right now. So gradually now I'll start moving on to pure colors. So I've already picked up burgundy, look, yellow and white for a cleaner color, but it turned out to be not enough, so I add more, and I mix in some blue cool colors. At the initial stage when you're just learning, I suggest that at first, for practice, you work without cool shades. So this is the base. An underpainting is often, well, for me it has always been easier to start with warm colors first, and then gradually add the cool ones. Cool colors go on top very well, they cover the warm layer, and at the same time they don't stay too cold, they blend into the warm. So I took an even thinner brush, and I'm working, by the way, from the very beginning I've been using synthetic brushes. Now I'm going in with really dark colors, marking the darkest, thinnest areas. I'm outlining the eyes and eyebrows. In this case, I'm doing the voiceover after I've finished painting the portrait. And I realized that during the process it's important for me to get into that kind of flow and not get distracted by commenting. Otherwise the work turns out very mechanical. And right now, of course, I'm mostly talking about what I've already done. If you want more detailed explanations about mixing paints, about how to find proportions, I have several instructional lessons on oil painting where I explain everything in great detail, and there are photos of the portrait right next to it, right on the same screen. And you can see how a copy is made, you could say, from a photo. In this case, since you could say I was being creative. I didn't really worry too much about the likeness or resemblance to the girl I was drawing from, and instead I allowed myself more freedom and just relied on my own preferences, whether I liked it or not. Accordingly, my approach to commenting for you now is a bit more superficial, that is, to explain everything in depth. That's not possible because when I was drawing, my goal wasn't to make it super precise. So the main difficulty in this kind of work, I'm there. Tonal relationships. That's me pouring the solvent. Choosing the right tonal relationships is the most difficult task. Right now, look, I'm working with the light areas, and I see that I completely missed it. They're way too pale. Here, I'm adding a bit of red. I'm adding another shade. Basically, I'm gradually starting to make this base more complex. One more thing. My goal wasn't to make a super realistic portrait or something completely smooth. I tried to make a painterly, vibrant portrait. Maybe there are some slight tonal mistakes somewhere, maybe some colors are a bit too loud. But the main point here was to convey exactly that emotion of brightness of sunlight. Also, I intentionally left some rough spots so that you could focus on them and examine them more closely. So in the end, I gave it a slightly decorative look, especially the background, right along the silhouette. Basically, I'm experimenting little by little, looking for options. In the portrait, I'm specifically looking for portrait options that I can create easily and playfully, and at the same time will look really cool. So the face has mostly taken shape already, here. Look, the face has already taken shape, and now I'm gradually mixing more precise colors. At first it was a very rough sketch. Now I wipe the brush more often and mix the color more precisely. At this stage I'll probably speed up the recording a bit. Actually no, this is where it gets interesting. I started adding blue colors. Honestly, when I just started painting, it was pretty, well, wild for me to add blues, greens, or purples to a face. And maybe only a year or two ago I started experimenting, adding cool tones more boldly. And I realized that I was missing out on a lot until I started adding cool tones. And of course, it gives the portrait a completely different look. Much more. More real, I guess I even missed it. Look, I'm adding white to the eyes, but the white isn't pure white. I mix it with dirty colors, so we get this gray color. And in the middle I leave it more white. Notice I didn't detail the eyes at all in the beginning. All the work is done through shapes. First, everything is done through dark strokes in the eyes, and then we find the highlights with light. There are advantages from all sides here, real advantages. First of all, you won't be able to over-brighten with white. Well, at least it won't be that easy to do. And even if you take this white, it gets mixed with the background, becoming more natural, more gray. Now we're outlining the upper eyelids. Naturally, there should also be darkness behind the upper eyelid. I take this dark shade and emphasize it. Oh, and look, here's another very important point. When you're doing the eyes, it's very important to make the edges, the corners of the eyes, darker and the center lighter if you have natural lighting. Because the light falls on the rounded part, on the curved shape, which can't be illuminated evenly everywhere. That means in some places there's a peak value of light, and in all the other areas it's darker. That's why it's often dark at the corners of the eyes, and in the center or near the center is the brightest spot. It's very important for your eyes to look round, not flat like on a board. I'm adding pure black now. Here I'm already adding it. Notice I'm not using a superfine brush. Again, it's intentional because at this stage and in this kind of portrait, we don't need it at all. We need this kind of roughness. It's not even about roughness, it's that a bigger brush gives you more freedom, so you're not focused on specific details. Alright, let me fast forward a little bit here. There. Here, while I'm working on the nose, I darken the lower part of the nose because that's about the cool tones. Darkening the lower part instantly made the nose look more three-dimensional. Look, now I've mixed red and white, maybe just a little bit of yellow, and now I'm mixing the lighter parts. The color is still a bit muddy, but still already much cleaner now. See, I'm taking it even redder. I'm mixing in orange. I'm adding another shade. Now, little by little, we're going to bring out our sun. And now I'm adding these patches here quite carefully. I'm not rushing. I'm checking how it looks. There might be two things you feel here. First, you add a patch and you think, oh, it doesn't fit at all. Next, two things. First, it really doesn't match in tone or color. Second thing, there just aren't any more patches like that. Similar in tone or brightness, that's why it still seems out of place. That's it, so if you're not sure which of these options is yours, you need to add more patches like that. If, in the end, when there are more of them, they still don't look right at all, then you can start removing them. Otherwise, you might get scared to add that patch. I mean, you might not add it because you got scared. And it looks that way simply because it's the only one for now. That is, when something new appears in our painting, it often looks a bit jarring because it's too different from what was there before. There, now I'm adding a cooler, purer color.